To discuss the ethics of data and AI, please welcome Dr. Amy Abernethy, Professor Rosalind Picard, and Moderator Dr. Warren von Eschenbach.
Welcome. My name is Warren von Eschenbach. I'm Associate Vice President, Assistant Provost, and a faculty member at the University of Notre Dame. And I'm delighted to welcome our distinguished panelists, two preeminent scientists and leaders in their respective fields who are going to guide us in our discussion about the ethics of data and artificial intelligence. Joining us, we have Dr. Amy Abernethy, who is the Principal Deputy Commissioner of the United States Food and Drug Administration. Welcome, Amy. And Dr. Rosalind Picard, who's a professor of MIT Lab, Chief Scientist and Chairman of Empatica. Welcome to you as well, Roz. Thanks for being here. As we know, artificial intelligence has great promise to improve the efficiency of healthcare and delivery of patient care. However, there's a need to minimize some of the ethical risks associated and to understand how we can integrate these technologies in clinical practices so that traditional goods such as privacy, patient autonomy, and transparency are protected. And so I'd like to ask our panelists a series of questions around this theme and would like to begin with you, Dr. Picard. You literally wrote the book on affective computing. Can you tell us a little bit about affective computing, how things have evolved and developed over the course of the nearly 25 years since the book was published, and what future progress do you envision or see in this field?
Yes, affective computing with an A, although hopefully nicely confused with effective computing, is computing that relates to, arises from, or deliberately influences human emotion. And it has evolved enormously over the last decades. It went from being really a crazy idea. Some people thought I was nuts to propose that machines would have skills of emotional intelligence. And now we see lots of technology out there, some of it inside things you might expect. Like if there's a robot going around interacting with people and it has cameras for eyes, you expect it to see if you're smiling or frowning. You expect it to listen to your tone of voice if you're upset. In fact, people are still trying to get their speaking devices on their kitchen countertops to understand that they are upset. So some of it still has a ways to go. But the understanding of the importance of emotional intelligence is out there. What may be more surprising is some progress that's been made in how technology can help understand emotion for health and for other purposes, most of which I think are very good, but some of which are also very concerning.
Terrific. Can you say a little bit more about some of these ethical issues that as AI moves into affective computing and we may have emotional capacities with artificial intelligence, and maybe some regulations that may help or hinder?
Yeah, I do think we need, it's funny, generally I'm not a big regulation person. I think we need to be careful about fostering innovation, but I do think we need more regulations than we have in this space right now. And they're sort of the obvious ones that you two amazing experts here certainly know. When any claims are being made with respect to affect that are medical, for example, we're now doing things in the mental health space. And as we collect data that corresponds to a number that a trained psychiatrist might give in a medical interview that's diagnostic, then those kinds of claims need much more serious vetting and careful studies done around them than somebody just kind of having a fun app on their phone that's trying to see if it can make you smile or make you think of positive things or be more grateful, more kind of in the well-being space. There's a lot of things happening in both areas. Across all of them, however, is a concern about people's privacy. If your data is really being used just on the end device to help you, then, and you can trust that, then usually people are pretty cool with that. If, however, a big technology provider company is using that to decide what kind of products to sell you, and you're not aware that they're doing it that way and you have not opted into that, or if some less benevolent government is using that data to make judgments about your fitness as a member of society and is using that maybe to group people like you into a separate category that doesn't get the same rights as other people in that society, then that's deeply disturbing. And unfortunately, some of that kind of stuff is already going on in the world. So we are aware of this huge spectrum of possibilities. And now we're trying to build AI that not only encrypts things on the end, but that also can selectively help you hide and keep private some of the affective and health information, not just in the usual encryption kinds of ways, but in some other very clever new ways that are very experimental right now.
Great, thank you. And that's a nice transition to Dr. Abernethy, talking about regulation. You've been a leader, really, and an advocate for integrating large data sets and health information to improve the care, patient-centered and personalized medicine. How has the use of large data changed over time in medical research? And what do you see as its promise for the future, and especially from the perspective of the Food and Drug Administration?
I often think about this overall idea that for the person sitting in front of me, her care should be informed by all the people who have a similar health history and illness that look like her and have come before her. And then her health and health history and what happened after she's received care gets reinvested in this overall system of data so that we're continuously learning. And as we accumulate knowledge across time, the process of taking care of people get better and better. And that overall thinking, this whole process of learning from every patient, has been really tagged as this concept of learning healthcare. And it importantly involves the use of accumulating data that's basically all around us and starts to tell the longitudinal health stories of individuals, which when put together as populations helps us understand the contours of illnesses across time, how medical products like drugs perform across time, and also how we can do better in the future. Now, importantly, there's a number of aspects related to today's conversation that are embedded in there. So you asked, how can these pieces be connected better through data? And importantly, as we think about the connection between the different parts of the learning cycle, so the discovery phase, like for example, of discovery of new drugs, to the clinical development phase, like clinical trials and understanding safety and effectiveness, then to the observation of what happens in real world settings after a medical product like a drug is approved by the FDA, and also helping doctors make more confident decisions at point of care. All of those now can be more closely connected through data. And what's interesting about that is that we can also start to move patient experience, patient voice, patient expectations and values earlier in the development process. So as we start to discover and develop drugs, we can better match them to what patients need and worry about, rather than waiting way until after a medical product is approved to figure out whether or not this, fits in to people's lives. Now, if we think about the conversation we're having here around privacy and people's information, this is also, in the context of learning healthcare, a conversation around collecting information from, for example, learning electronic health records, claims data, Fitbits, and other places that reflect your medical journey. And so we've got a lot of responsibility here to learn how to use these data sets confidently and in a way that maintains privacy, and make sure that we have a very public conversation around what do we as individuals want and need to be able to have a trustworthy system that's going to be able to use those data going forward.
And just to follow up a little bit on this issue about privacy, Dr. Abernethy, you've talked about getting to a point in the future where patients can donate information about themselves or medical information for research in the same way we might donate tissue samples or organs and the like. Who owns these data in these studies, and how can we reassure patients that their privacy and autonomy will be safeguarded?
By talking about data donation, I think we open up a new kind of conversation around the use of our data and how we have affirming oversight over where and how it can be used. And so I really tried to promote this kind of general concept of being able to have a technology underpinning that allows us to make those kinds of decisions around the use of our data, and also be able to, as individuals, be able to think about what would I want to have happen with my data. So for example, I want to donate my data sets to Alzheimer's research or melanoma research, or I hope that my data goes to help discover new specific types of treatments. And so being able to have more insight about what's possible and more specific affirmation around what I want. Now, importantly, within the context of the privacy space, I think we have a lot of responsibility, especially as we go forward and we have more and more data sets that are being put to use every single day in many different ways. And we have laws in place and we have a responsibility of following those laws. So for example, the HIPAA expectations and regulations. But in 2021 and beyond, I think those laws are insufficient for what we expect in terms of preserving the ascertainment of this is Amy or this is Roz in a particular data set and ascribing directly to an individual. And so we've got a lot of responsibility of having a public conversation around how far our laws can take us and our responsibility to get it right, but also what do we want in the future? So 2 points. One is the importance of the conversation, and I hope that this and other conversations continue to advance our thinking about this. And the second is the need for innovation. It doesn't mean that the way things look right now have to be the way that things look in the future. Perhaps we can create synthetic data sets that maintain, for example, the same underlying characteristics and data representation without being able to be ascribed to any particular individual. Maybe we have new ways of doing analyses that aggregate information so that it can be completely private. I don't know, but I do think we need to let innovation work for us and we need to expect that.
And speaking of innovation, Dr. Picard, you have a long history of developing technologies to help society, improving healthcare and individual well-being. How are these technologies and AI being used in ways that make decisions or influence decisions about life and death? Who's making those and how do we ensure they're done properly?
Thanks, and it's such a pleasure to get to answer this. Warren, years ago when I called you, I just had a crazy idea of could I put AI in a wearable and would FDA ever be willing to approve something like this? And today I'm thrilled to say it's not only approved for adults and children, it's out there, and I'm hearing from families that it's making a difference, saving lives. And it's not I should be clear, it's not the AI that's saving the lives, it's the AI working with people to save lives. It's the AI detecting constant, continuous little things that we just don't recognize, and then running a very rapid alert to summon somebody, a human, to come at the moment that somebody needs help. In particular, we have clearances now for AIs running on this device that are monitoring for seizures. And the seizure itself is not usually deadly, but there's a period of time afterwards where people, activity in the brain can change in a way that turns off your breathing. And you might think the person's just looking like they're resting after the seizure, but it's a really critical time to make sure there's a human being there in case you stop breathing. So the AI is detecting this event, calling people on your caregiver list, and with your consent, also giving your location with your consent, and bringing somebody there, hopefully giving good instructions of what to do. So this is just one example of AI that's out there right now. There are also lots of other things in the works right now where your smartphone and your wearables are collecting these little changes that have to do with your sleep, your activity, your social interaction, if you choose to share that through your phone. If you choose, it could also read the content of your text. Is your sentiment getting nasty and negative and down and out, or are you a little more hopeful and positive? Are you empathetic? There are all kinds of things that can learn from you. It's a little scary, actually, what's possible these days, today, what's possible, not just in the future. And our job is to figure out how to use that information in a way that people are aware of, consented, fully informed, and benefiting from, and that they are benefiting from it first. Whether it's a life-threatening situation like a seizure or a long-term disability situation like chronic pain or a mental health condition. And there I'm super excited because we have an opportunity to not only detect very serious events. But I think to see them before they become serious and give people early indications of what are you doing that's making this bad thing more likely to happen, and what are you doing that's making it so that these bad things aren't happening, and then enabling you, of course, to know how to do more of the thing that leads you to have healthy days, physically and mentally.
Great.
Can I amplify something that Roz just said, Warren? There's two things that were in your point there, Roz, that I wanted to highlight. One is that I think we had sort of almost the sense in the last decade that AI was going to turn us all into robots, might almost make our world too mechanical. And in fact, use of new technologies and artificial intelligence actually help to basically supplement or complement what we're doing every day and actually point the way for more human interactions. So it can be people plus technology doing the right thing. And I think it's really, really important. And being able to really open up the world in a way that also maintains the humanity is critical. The second thing that you highlighted is that we have to know that the solutions that we're building actually work and work as intended. And that really requires the deliberate and careful evaluation of these solutions by people who develop them, like yourself, as well as the outside review of those solutions by third parties like the FDA, to make sure that we indeed all agree that the solution's working as expected. And that's going to be critical to the AI space going forward, because ultimately we want these solutions to work in a way that actually makes us all more efficient, more effective, and actually more human.
Great. Thank you. For our final question, I'd like to pose to you both, and stepping back a little bit and thinking more in terms of systems and justice. Pope Francis, in his recent encyclical, really called upon us to promote this notion of solidarity, and in particular, a principle that, quote, "The lives of all are prior to the appropriations of goods by a few." So how do we ensure these technologies, whether they're the wearable devices, the use of AI, personal medical information, will benefit all individuals, especially the most vulnerable, and not exacerbate existing disparities in healthcare? Roz, would you like to?
Yeah, the
first?
insurance part is the hard part. I love the question. And as I think about how things work, in fact, I'll just tell you a story. Recently, we were getting ready to do our next big experiment in how wearables and smartphone data could help forecast and complement what psychiatrists are doing in mental health to scale psychiatry better. And as we're doing that, all of this Black Lives Matter, all this all these racial inequities and injustices, we're getting more attention than ever in the US. And it's funny because we've always known about them, but I don't think we've done enough. And recently we were, really soul searching how to do more. And I realized that we keep working with these top hospitals, with these top partners. And I asked, and we always keep track of the demographics, but we hadn't really looked for different demographics. And so now we're, making a, really prioritized effort to find the groups that have been left out of a lot of these studies and make sure that we're going first and foremost to them. So usually these groups call me up and want to work with me. Suddenly I find myself cold calling people who don't even know I exist and saying, hey, I understand you have a population like this. Can I meet you? Can I talk to you a little bit about what we do? Could we find a way to work together? And it was really, the shoe was kind of on the other foot. I'm learning we've got to build their trust. We've got to earn their trust. They have not been treated well in the past. And I think we have to really make an effort to build relationships that have not been naturally built because we just keep reinforcing our connections that we already have. So I think we need to get people out of their comfort zones, out of their well-funded ivory towers and other places that are making a lot of cool things happening. Get out into the areas of the cities where people have real need and it's been ignored. So that's where we're trying to go now. We have a ways to go. It's definitely not insured yet. But I'm excited about it. I think we have so much to learn and a lot more good we can be doing.
That's a terrific development. Amy, we'll give you the last word on this if you have any thoughts about this particular topic.
So it's such an important topic that I probably could talk for hours. And I think I would like to hit on a couple of things. As Roz was saying, the more that we're thoughtful about making sure that the AI solutions that are being designed are representative of all populations, and we know how they're going to perform for people of many different backgrounds, that's going to be critical, which means that we actually have to have the representation of all individuals in the data sets that are informing the development of these types of solutions. It means we also have to think about, when solutions get developed, how people with all different backgrounds, rural, urban, et cetera, are going to be able to access them, and what does that look like? And then the last two things, one is we actually have to invest in the research to expose the gaps so that we can then address them. And we need to invest in the conversations to make sure that we're all at the same table looking for solutions together. As government, I think we can make sure that we're making investments in a thoughtful way, and we talk in a very inclusive way about what we need to do. And we also need to build partnerships all across industry, nonprofits, academia, other government organizations to keep talking about how we find solutions together.
That's wonderful. I know we could go on for a long time. It is an important topic, but unfortunately we have to stop there. Thank you both for being with us today, and especially thank you for all you do on behalf of patients everywhere. Take care.
Yeah.